let's just mention, while we're on DC for now, you've probably watched the American policy change a lot even in the last few years. And people argue now that the next presidential candidate will probably be pro-crypto. And that now to run for office in America, it's probably smarter to be pro-crypto because they've kind of looked at the audience, and most people, would rather have a candidate that is pro-crypto. It's the best way to get elected. Now, I ran for mayor of London here in 2021, and I realized that all candidates care about two things: votes and money. And if they believe that the people really want that, it seems like they might change policies. Now, that might contrast with Gary Gensler, who is in the SEC, who's an appointed position, but also that can change over time. And so I was just curious about your perspective of policy in America, where it might be going.
So I think the policy aspect in America, at least from our own observation, relates a little bit to sort of where the sentiment lies. I think less about crypto, although crypto is part of the narrative, but more about capitalism. So my perspective as to what's happening in America is a little bit sort of this war on capitalism between, let's say, the younger generation versus the older generation, who very much sort of are, let's call it, thinking about sort of, the elements of, why capitalism is important, the property rights and the freedom aspect, and related to sort of, I guess, the meaning behind, why we basically need to have, I guess, relatively smaller government and perhaps, less controls, as an example. Whereas I think, the recent study, and actually studies in the last couple of years, have revealed that, I think most Americans under the age of, I think it was 30, actually are socialist leaning. And this idea that Americans could even talk about socialism 10 years ago would have just, probably had you kicked out of the country, right? Yeah. And now it's a political movement, and it's not just culminated or actually developed things like Bernie Sanders, who are all, by the way, well-meaning, right? The whole point is that they see a problem. Right? Young people don't really have an opportunity in America the way that they sort of their parents' generation had, for instance. The opportunity wasn't there. So capitalism hasn't worked for them. So the consequence, therefore, is that when we think about the backlash that we see this, for instance, in gaming, sort of non-fungible tokens and sort of, I guess, blockchain in gaming is very much popular in Asia, right? I mean, all the Korean and even Japanese game companies in Southeast Asia are all embracing it right now and saying this is the future and building towards it. Obviously we're in Hong Kong, but we're a global business and we can see the numbers grow. Whereas in America, if you remember last year, big gaming companies like EA were like, NFTs and blockchain, that's really interesting. And then, a big vocal minority of gamers were like lashing against it. Our feeling is that this isn't so much about, this fear of sort of introducing a new technology as much as it's a fear of introducing capitalism, which hasn't worked for them in the real life, basically into the digital world, which is basically where most of their time and attention is, where they actually have, where their society is, where their friends are, and where they aren't judged necessarily by how much money they have, because that is what is happening in the real world. Mm-hmm. And I think this anti-capitalist movement that we're seeing in America is, what is crypto? Crypto is digital capitalism as far as they're concerned. So digital capitalism, like Bitcoin, and the crypto bros is all bad, and non-fungible tokens is just covered basically in that whole area because they think that, it's like thinking that, every NFT is like a Lamborghini to the car industry, right? Like if you buy a car, it must be a Lamborghini. Of course, we know that's not true, but from their perspective, that's what they're thinking. I say this sometimes, where I think the American dream is much more alive and well in Asia than it is in America. And it is somewhat tragic, because the American dream is what people around the world aspire to. And I think this has a lot to do with the fact that basically Americans generally, the younger generation, are doing worse off, right? And I think this is the political climate. So when we talk about a pro-crypto, let's say, sort of politician emerging, it has to solve with it sort of, and has to explain why actually blockchain and crypto is beneficial for young people, why it becomes more financially inclusive, why it can create more equity. And we believe that very firmly, but with that comes a lesson in capitalism. With that comes a lesson in property rights, which is something that we also have to overcome, as to people understand, what does physical property mean? That's what this means in terms of the ability to have freedom to transact and to have actual economic freedom. Well, the same is true for digital freedom, right? Many of, we spoke about this in the last show, many of the people who use Instagram or even TikTok, right, or Facebook, for instance, don't actually understand that the data that they're using on these platforms has value, right? And actually that they're mining, literally strip mining, your ideas and your time and your attention and make money from it.
Digital colonialism, you call it to me.
Digital colonialism.
Taking your data and selling it back to you.
Correct. And on top of that, we're now still in a kind of digital feudalism. And because they don't fully understand that, they're sort of railing against it in a different way, but they don't understand that actually, if I at least have the freedom to know what it's worth, then someone else can basically give me better value for it. And I think this is the point, right? Because Facebook derives so much value. Actually, all the platforms, even Apple and Google in their own ways derive so much value from our time and attention. Why don't they share some of that back to the people who are actually providing that service? And therein lies the big problem, right? Because the value that they're generating actually goes entirely into, of course, their balance sheets. And it doesn't even sit in America as an American corporation. It's like in Ireland or something, which has, been optimized for taxes. And while we understand from a corporate perspective why they would maybe do that, it actually is against the spirit, because you're making money in America. How come you're not giving back to America, right? Just imagine if, Apple and Facebook took 1% of their balance sheet of cash and reinvested it in startups in America, what would happen to the ecosystems that they're trying to construct? It would be bigger than the biggest venture funds that we all talk about. It would be bigger than A16Z's fund or Sequoia and, Kleiner Perkins and these sort of incredible venture funds that are out there. They have that capacity to do so. It used to be that we would receive taxes, and then those taxes would then go into social services, and that's not happening. So I think this is the problem about sort of where the classic form of capitalism, shareholder capitalism, has basically gone wrong and has disenfranchised all the new people emerging into the space, which is the young people, because they can't participate. And this is why Web3 is so exciting, because it really transfers what was a kind of shareholder capitalism words where the zero-sum outcome where only a small number of people would benefit into stakeholder capitalism. Because every time you own land, for instance, in Sandbox, you're not just a customer consumer, you're a customer owner. You now have a stake in its success. Whether it does well or not is maybe not the reason you purchase it, but you are a participating member in the society, in the culture that would be, for instance, Sandbox, or Phantom Galaxies, or Rev Racing. And that means that as that business grows, as that community grows, you actually own equity in the project in some form or fashion. Like if you own real estate in London, right, you benefit if London as an economy does better, if it becomes more wealthy, if there's more business activity, if the GDP grows. So right, it would be a good thing for you to be an owner of something in London as opposed to just simply a consumer. So I think that's where this will go. And I think when we're able to, or a politician arises that is really able to explain this to most youth, and just to be clear, many young people in America love this space, right? They're influencing their parents' generation to actually go in there. But there's a lot of people who don't understand this because of this whole anti-capitalist sentiment. But if we can help explain to them that actually this gives you more equity, this makes it more fair for you, you actually become a real stakeholder, an economic stakeholder in this community, then I think you can win them over. We need to find a politician that is able to explain that.
Hey, do you want to profit from crypto? Then join my DeFi Academy. The Crypto DeFi Academy will help you create generational wealth. But don't take my word for it. Listen to my students.
When I first got into crypto, I remember thinking to myself, I need to learn more. Brian Rose, learning crypto, learning DeFi, gotta do it.
I am so grateful that I jumped in and did this. I had to break through some limiting beliefs that I can do this, that I can afford this, that I can be in this.
It challenges the things that are deeply rooted within us.
Joining DeFi Academy has been one of the best decisions I have made on my blockchain journey.
This course was a life changer, a game changer, a huge eye-opener, coming from knowing practically nothing at the speed of the learning over 4 weeks was just fantastic.
The information you provided in this class was invaluable.
I feel far more confident in my next steps.
You took complex concepts and made them easier to understand.
What's different than so many other ones is it just doesn't tell you what to do. It actually makes you do it.
This is for people who are serious about becoming traders. This is the way it should be done.
I realized from this learning experience again that it is not about what you learn, but about who you learn it from.
The energy was insane. I've never experienced such incredible energy on a live call. Brian Rose, you are a legend, my friend.
It's the only thing in the market where you can get all information and learn everything what you need to know.
Everything is so clear and so well done, and I'm just forever grateful for this program.
It made me feel so much more confident about crypto than I did before.
I did not anticipate how passionate I was going to become about it.
It's of course been like a big learning experience for me, not just in the crypto space, but just in overall balance of life.
What I've learned is, how to take ownership, of my life in a way that I really hadn't before.
Yeah, you can't put a price on that, really.
I would recommend it to anybody, top notch.
Excellence does not come cheap. So if you want excellence, you gotta pay for it, but it's so worth it.
Pull the trigger. That's what this course is about.
You're not going to regret it, really. It's amazing.
Thank you, Brian and team.
So what are you waiting for? Crypto is happening now. Click the link below, submit your application, and let me mentor you on how to create generational wealth and build the decentralized financial infrastructure of the future.